Oh, okay. So, Linda, would you like to chit chat or add to the conversation here a little? Well, I'm waiting for others to join in.
Yeah, it's pretty funny that you mentioned pharmaceuticals because I started off with a stroke about a year ago, and that was because of hormones I was taking. But luckily for the stroke, they found brain aneurysms, and I had those removed in February. So I'm a little bit loopy, still trying to get my memory back. Unfortunately, it was in the area of short and long-term memory.
Yeah.
So it's a struggle, and I completely understand what you're saying. There's just not enough out there for people like us. I feel so alone most of the time. Nobody really understands what it's like to live with this.
So you can connect with it being a hidden disability.
It is. It really is, because I look okay. Now I can talk okay. I couldn't talk before.
Mm.
But you're right. It's a hidden disability.
Oh, absolutely. I've been accused of being, lying about my brain injury because you couldn't hear or see anything until I tell them to give me their hand and let them feel the dent in my head. And then they freak out.
That's true. I have a huge dent too.
Yeah.
Wow.
Let's see who that is.
Well, I'm afraid to say I've got a hole in the back of my head, but no dents from when they drilled to release the pressure.
Right. Like they would for a shunt, like for hydrocephalus type thing.
I don't know. There's not much about that in my medical records.
Oh, okay.
But I've sort of found out, well, somebody else's cost.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody touches or goes near it, I go absolutely apeshit.
Wow.
I've literally, someone's been cutting my hair, and I've swung round and twatted them, and I'm not even known I've done it.
Mm-hmm. It's just impulse and reaction. Yeah.
I know, but I don't know why I did it. That's the thing.
Wow.
Something in my probably subconscious that
Exactly
is sort of saying somebody goes near it.
Hey, Mike. Hey, guys.
Hi, Henry. I was wondering who that was because it just says iPhone on here, but that's cool.
No, I can't get in on my laptop, so I use my phone.
Yeah, that's better. Good.
But I don't know why it couldn't get in my laptop.
I'm not sure. It's one thing after another with that thing.
Yes.
So we have James, Linda, Aaron, and Nicole that are all on.
Okay.
And I'm waiting to see. I'll give it a couple more minutes, and then we're gonna go get on topic. What I was talking about today with communication between caregivers and survivors.
Right.
And that we can get some more caregivers on here so they can open their mind. But this call is being recorded, so I gotta watch our language. But it's going to be recorded, and if all goes well, I wanted to have this shared so other people can hear and understand what we're talking about today. I have a lot of slides to go over and read, and of course I want your feedback as well along the way. I have 52 slides, so it's a lot of reading, but it's good information for us as survivors and for the public to learn and give some more ideas about patients and understanding one another's perspectives and the struggles that we go through.
Right.
The things I have are all based on medical facts, research that I've done, and this is part 2 of a series that we had about bridging the gap, and it went phenomenal the last time. But we had so many things to go over that I had to continue it on another show for another 2 hours. So I'm hoping we can go over it and we have plenty of time and it's helpful for you guys because, that's what we're here for. This is what it's all about. James, if you want to cut out, I understand you're tired. He's in Great Britain, so I don't know how long he's going to be able to stay awake because it's what time it's what after 1 o'clock in the morning there now, right?
Yes, it's 21 minutes past.
Yeah. Oh, it's almost exactly 5 hours. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's understandable.
Yeah. I know those
Yeah.
hours.
Yeah, and I've been awake since 8:30.
Sorry about Pittsburgh, Mike. To change the subject for a second. Sorry about Pittsburgh.
Oh yeah, no, it's all right. It's a whole other topic. Yeah.
Yes.
So.
And I won't mention Super Bowl.
Shh, no.
Not yet.
Who was on before? Somebody was on before and they signed off. We lost them. James, Linda, Erin, and oh, I know who that was. Nicole. Yeah, she had company, so I guess she signed off. That's right.
Right.
Okay.
Who's on? Linda?
Yeah.
That's me. I'm in Boston.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. You were on last week, correct?
I'm on what?
You were on last week?
Yes, I was.
Okay. And how's it going there? How's it going, Linda? Same?
Is that for me?
Yeah.
Oh, it's going much better.
Okay.
How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. Surviving. All we can do is survive.
Yeah, we're the lucky ones, aren't we?
Yes, very lucky. I was lucky. We're lucky.
Now, if I could only have this luck in the lottery.
Wouldn't that be nice?
We'd all
I
be
don't play, but wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, we could all go live in Hawaii.
There you go.
I don't know. My choice would probably go. I would be joining James because I've always had a thing for London and Great Britain and Scotland and Ireland and.
Come on, London's an absolute. Well, how can I put it? SH1T hole.
Yeah, I was just
Really?
going to say.
You know what I love about the one thing I love about London, or not just London, because you can go all over England, is music. That's my passion, and that's my biggest thing. I love history too, but man, England's got one hell of a history as well.
Yeah, they definitely up there with the music.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm in love with, well, I was in love with George Michael. I'd love to see his place.
Oh, I go back a lot further than that with music.
Well, one thing you can look up as to sort of where I live on Dartmoor, and there's a hell of a lot of tales and a hell of a lot of folklore surrounding it. A lot of witchery and sorcery has been going on. I also live I live about 15 miles from Dartmoor Prison, which is where the prisoners built their own prison and then they put them in it in Napoleonic times.
Oh, wow.
Oh, I'm coming to visit you.
It's in the middle of a bog. So, you know, if they escaped, then the bog would have them.
Wow.
That's crazy. That's wild. One day I'll be there. It's me and my wife we made a promise to my uncle who had just passed that we'd take him and his wife and his son's ashes when he had passed away. We'd take him to Scotland. So we're definitely making a trip out there. It's just my wife, who's from an island, has a thing about boats. So I was like, I want to take a cruise out there. And she's like, oh, no, no, I think we'll just fly and just make it one quick trip, blah, 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 and stay there and look around. So we're waiting to see how that goes.
Right.
I'm betting she wins.
I'm betting that too.
All right. All right, let me get started here because it's almost 8:30. And
Yeah. She been watching Titanic again. Is that why she doesn't want to go on a boat?
no, she's always had it. I broke the ice with her when we first got married. I took her out on a fishing boat, like a party boat, and she did well. She was like, wow, there's no whales and sharks out and coming up from the boat and stuff. So it was kind of funny. Oh, speaking of, that's my wife on right now. Look at that. Yeah, rename Anna. Okay. Hi, wifey. You just made it. Okay, I'm gonna get started with reading this, and I'll leave these because it's only the six of us, so I'll leave the lines open. But if you want to say something, please be considerate, so that we can stop and everybody can have a chance to talk to one another.
Hi, Anna.
Hi, Sunshine.
Okay, can we get started now? I'm really panicking because we ran out of time last time, and I don't want to do a part 3 on the same topic again and not have a chance to go over things. I'm hoping you guys are all, I think everybody here is online. Yeah, actually everybody is online, not by phone.
No, I don't think Linda is.
Linda, you had called in, correct?
Yeah, my brain is trying to figure out how to get this online.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll work on that during the course of the week. I'll figure it out. I'll help you out with it. We got one more caller that just called in.
Okay.
Let me see who this is. It's a 772 number. May I ask who this is?
Asteri Michelle.
It's Michelle.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Hi, Michelle. Thank you for joining us. We're just getting started. So I was just trying to figure out who's on online and who's on by phone. So Linda and Michelle are on by phone.
My first name is Asteri.
I'm sorry?
My first name is Asteri. Michelle is my last name.
Oh, I'm sorry. Here, I'm crazy about names, like making sure I spell them right. How do you spell your first name?
My first name is Asterie.
Astieree?
No, Asterie.
Wow, very unique name. Okay. Okay, let me see if I got it right here. Asterie.
No,
You got
I
it.
think no, I think. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was Alpha something Papa India Echo.
I have it right. So you could see it on the screen the way she had said it was all right. All right. I'm going to get started reading. I have a PowerPoint presentation to read, and I want to get started on this. If somebody would like to chime in, please say excuse me or something nice, and we'll all have a chance to speak our side, okay? A big thing about this is a lot of misinformation that people have about brain injuries. So I wrote here, I was like, we would like to help you all to recognize and understand your own emotions, and explains why they are sometimes so strong for the both caregiver and survivor of a brain injury. This offers some practical ideas about how you all can manage your own emotions so that you use them, you can harness them, but are not governed entirely by them. Like a way of moving forward. A definition of social communication. Social communication involves being able to understand others and what others meant to communicate. It also involves being able to express your thoughts and feelings to others in a way they can understand. And this is for both sides. Again, the communication barriers between caregivers and survivors is huge, and this is an ongoing issue for a lot of people. So I thought this would be a prime way to be able to address it. Another term for aspects of social language is pragmatics. Social communication includes many skills. These skills can be verbal, the words that you can say or write, or nonverbal, intonation, voice volume, the use of gestures like your hands and arms and things like that, facial expression, and body positioning. In fact, how something is said can be more important than what is said. Some examples of social communication skills include starting and ending conversations, showing feelings with facial expressions, staying on topic, using gestures, selecting and changing conversation topics, and speaking at an appropriate rate. Here's a few more: as inhibiting inappropriate communication behaviors, like, you know, when somebody's talking to you and you like fold your arms and turn your back on them. That's a little bit rude, you know. Using tone of voice to express meanings and feelings. I'm notorious for it is when I get my voice raises, a lot of times people think that I'm angry, and I'm not. I'm just trying to get a point across. Another one is turn taking, everybody having a chance to speak their side. Eye contact, which is enormous for me, is when you're talking to somebody, making eye contact so you can see each other is a big one. And another one, asking for clarification, like a review, is huge in understanding and communicating properly, so you can bridge those gaps of like not understanding. Did somebody say something? I didn't know if I missed something there.
No, I was just listening.
Oh, okay. All right. A big one with brain injuries, and we talk about this from time to time, but not often enough, is aphasia. And I think all of us that are brain injury survivors have a moment. I know I do, especially when I'm tired, is coming up with the right words that you're trying to express to communicate like what you're trying to say or how you're trying to say something, and the frustration that goes along with it. Injury to language centers of the brain leads to a condition called aphasia. There are different levels of impairment and the term dysphagia refers to partial loss of language. However, in practice, like a medical practice, the terms are interchangeable, and here we could just simply use the term aphasia. I don't know how, I mean, it sounds like James is well informed and he's well educated in the aspects of brain injury more than most people, or the brain itself, because he's had to live with it since he was born. And I'm sure he's going to agree with that himself. The Wernicke's area and the Broca's area are two regions of the brain that are important for understanding and using language. These areas are found on the dominant side of the brain, and for most people, particularly are right-handers and that are in the left hemisphere. Injury to these areas leads to two main forms of aphasia: receptive aphasia and expressive aphasia. And mine happened on the left, so that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
And in practice, like I said, in a medical practice, it's quite rare for pure receptive or expressive aphasia to occur. Stroke can be associated with the damage to very specific areas of the brain, including the language areas. However, most forms of acquired brain injury affect several brain regions and cause a combination of difficulties.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I hate to, hello. Somebody give me back. There's a lot of background noise, and I can't hear you.
Okay. What I'll do is I'll mute everybody.
No, it's not you.
No, I can mute everybody else. So we don't have an issue there. And I'll open the lines up and ask questions every now and then.
All right, cool.
Okay. If anybody has anything that I went over and wants to go over it again, if you have a pen handy or something, write it down so we don't miss out on explaining anything to anybody.
Yes, I do.
Okay, go ahead.
What about cross dominance?
Oh, for different regions of the brain, like back and forth.
Cross dominance, becoming sort of a bit ambidextrous, I suppose you could say. One thing I used to do when I was a youngster is I would effectively read from trying to think the wrong way round,
Yeah.
and my tracking would go at 45 degrees, and my writing would also go at 45 degrees.
Yeah, that's actually it's kind of common, believe it or not. I mean, my wife will tell you the same thing, because we were both teachers for children with and without special needs. All right, yeah, I'm hearing that background noise. I'm gonna mute everybody except for James. I'll be right back. I'll give it a minute. Okay. What happens with a lot of children, especially when they're younger, is they're learning a preference. Like they don't know whether they're right or left-handed. They do both, and it's trial and error. It's easier for them to write or read and things like that with. And I think that's along the lines of what you were getting at. Like I know with me, I'm right-handed, but I do a lot of stuff left-handed, and I'm more flexible that way. Like if I play basketball, I do everything left-handed, but I write with my right hand. So I think that it's a learned trait. Some people are and some people aren't. Does that make any sense to what you were saying there?
Yeah, reasonably. One thing I used to do was I'd be writing something on my left hand, and I could change hands and carry on writing with my right hand, and I'd switch between the two. Another bad trait I've got is I change between using lowercase and uppercase when I'm writing, but not. I don't do it like the proper way. Like you start a word, so you start like with a capital or whatever. I mix and match them.
That's really interesting. That's so unique.
Yes.
That's I think that's a processing thing, and that's definitely a cognitive. I don't think that's a good or bad or anything like that, but it's definitely a processing of. I'm trying to see. I am trying to think of the words I'm trying to come up with. It's you saying like a dominance, but like when you're writing and you're doing some in uppercase and some in lowercase, and it's what you were saying, James, is it's random. Which ones do what? Like what when it happens?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, that's the processing from the brain of like what you're thinking and what you're doing. It's a mechanical aspect of it.
No, so say if I, James, write my name. So I probably do, I mean, yeah, I know I do it capital J, small a, MES, but if I'm not thinking straight, I might do, say, small j, capital A,
Uh-huh.
capital M, small e, small s.
Mm.
Let me ask Anna, are you there listening?
Yeah, I'm listening.
What do you know that kind of what I'm trying to get at is do you have an understanding or like or an explanation for what the
Somebody typing. I'm sorry. Goes right over what they're saying, Mike. You hear it?
I hear it too. It's like a
Yeah.
tapping kind of noise.
Yeah.
Yeah. It goes right over when Mike talks.
I got it. It's done. I took care of it. I know what it was.
Thank you.
Yeah, it wasn't me. It was somebody on the call. I had to
I know. I
Okay.
know.
Okay. So Anna, do you know what I'm talking about? It's like a fine motor or a gross motor skill.
No, what it is, it's his coordination of using his hands and the concentration of the brainwave. It has to be a learned behavior. For example, like you're teaching a child how to write their ABCs for the first time. There, you use the brain power to concentrate and focus on conveying that message to your hands on how to formulate and how to write those letters. In some adults, I mean, different people tend to do it at different stages, or if you have, acquired a TBI and you're having to relearn it again, you already have enabled and embedded that learned behavior of writing already.
Yeah.
So now indirectly, you know the information, you know how to do it, but now it's like you're relearning it again, but your senses, your muscle tones, your sense of concentration and focusing is it's at a different level. It's more heightened. So that's why you may flip flop and use different hands. Indirectly, you may write a capital letter where it's supposed to be a lowercase letter. But if you were concentrating on it, you'd do it perfect.
That's exactly what he said. When he's not thinking about it, he's just writing. He's doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, so your brain has already, it already knows what it's supposed to do, and it already knows how to do it. But when you acquire a TBI, in certain things, you have to relearn again. And for some people, this is where the gift comes in, because now they acquire skills that they didn't have before. Like you couldn't, if you're a righty, now you didn't realize it. Now you're learning how to write as a lefty, and you could do it just as perfect.
Excuse me, would that be similar to what I have to do? When I text somebody or write somebody, I have to go over I have to look again at what a texter wrote to make sure it's right.
Yeah, it is the same thing. It's like
Okay.
you know the information, you know
Right.
how to do it.
Right.
Right? It's just a matter of reteaching yourself on a different level of how to get it done properly.
Correct. Okay.
And and I say, like, when you have a TBI, that's where you realize where your gift lies, because you realize now that there's so many things that you could do that you never thought that were capable of doing. I, for one, would love to write with my left hand. When I try, it looks like I'm a toddler scribbling. But it's fun to learn, and it's amazing when you could do that.
Yeah, mine still does at times.
It's just a matter of the brain retraining itself, but it's retraining on a different level.
That goes along with what I was just about to start reading about. Reading and writing and speech and things, because we were talking about aphasia and coming up with the right words. A speech and language therapist will be is able to, obviously, to assess individual patterns of aphasia. The treatments, and it goes right along with writing often and going over and doing it and troubleshooting and training your brain is so if the treatment, it involves therapy, advice, and different strategies. And that's one of the things even I did when I was taking my college courses after the brain injury is retraining your brain and working again and practicing. Going back to the aphasia, there's another type called receptive aphasia, and that's, of course, receptive. It's retaining information. Receptive aphasia is an impairment of the understanding of language. This usually occurs because of damage to the Wernicke's area, so it's sometimes referred to as Wernicke's aphasia. The term receptive aphasia is actually slightly misleading because of the condition also affects aspects of speech output. People with receptive aphasia usually retain the ability to speak fluently, and the term fluent aphasia is sometimes used. However, the content of speech is often jumbled or lacking meaning.
Yeah,
And
you
it's,
see,
I'm sorry, Henry?
I say words.
Oh, okay.
No,
Those
no,
dates.
it was me that was piping up.
Oh, okay.
A lot of it, I tend to throw people because my vocabulary, I would say, is I'm known as being very articulate.
Hmm. Boy, I get that too. Very, very descriptive. And I was just talking to you. I see the same thing with you as well. Very, like you're making sure you're getting the point across the right way, and very, I don't know a better word than saying descriptive of what you're trying to say or how you're trying to say something. You want to make sure it's to the point of what you're trying to get at, correct?
Yeah, to the point. And there's times when, somebody will ask me, what does that word mean? I probably can't tell them what it means, but in terms of the context in which I've used it, they've had to go to the dictionary and look it up.
That's awesome. That shows us, and there's a part of this near the end that talks about that kind of intelligence. It's well beyond IQ. You'll see it near the end about that. That's awesome. I love hearing that. In its most severe form, the person will not recognize spoken or written words. There's somebody that we have in our group. There's a few people that that go through this, especially when it comes to reading, and which I'll get back into later. They will not be able to understand sentences or follow conversations. However, usually people will retain some understanding. For example, a person may recognize some but not all of the words, or simple but not complex sentences. It may be that their familiar words still have meaning, like a pill, but that less frequently used words are no longer understood, like medication. They'll see a pill, but they don't understand the word medication. That's just an example. Like the idea of idiot, they know what it's for, but they can't come out with the words of saying what it is, the actual word. The person with receptive aphasia may have a better ability in one area than another. Example, they may be able to recognize written words more readily than spoken ones, or vice versa. They may also have retained.
Can you mute everyone else? I can hear a few people coughing and bits and bobs, and it's ruining it.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, yeah, I'll get that. I'll mute everybody here. I apologize. Okay. The person with, again, I'll go back. The person with receptive aphasia may have a better ability in one area rather than another. They may be able to recognize written words more readily than spoken words, or vice versa. They also may have retained some nonverbal skills. Example, like they may recognize gestures or pictures. Therefore, using nonverbal forms of communication may help the person's understanding much better. And this goes back to what I was speaking about before. Receptive aphasia also affects aspects of speech output. People may speak in long chains of words and that have limited meaning, like jargon, or they use incorrect words or unintentionally create made-up words. We see that. Anna knows what I'm talking about there, where we've seen that, where they come up with their own jargon to kind of get a point across because they can't come up with the words they're trying to say. The problem with understanding language means a person may be unaware of their errors and expect the listeners to respond. And that's frustrating on both parts. Usually when unable to think of a word, people can describe it instead of, it's a pet and it barks, instead of coming up with dog. It may be harder for someone with receptive aphasia to use this strategy, as they may not be able to effectively link the meaning with the object or the person or the thing that they're talking about. Expressive aphasia is an impairment of the ability to use and express language. This is caused by damage to the Broca's area, so the condition is sometimes referred as Broca's aphasia. In its most severe form, the affected person may be unable to produce a meaningful speech. More commonly, speech output may lack fluency or relatively few words used. The speaker will use short, simple sentences, broken up frequent pauses. However, they may be able to understand language normally and be aware of their own difficulties. They're understanding everything that's being said, but they can't come up with the words to describe what they're saying unless it's short, quick, very, to the point. And we had somebody that had stopped by here today that I know that's a member of our organization that he goes through that, and he'll just wait. And then when he does respond, he'll respond in really 5 words or less. And here's what it leads to is the output. This is the outcome of having people with this type of aphasia. The output may be a struggle, but sometimes an individual can provide accurate if limited information. Speech may be telegraphic, omitting small words such as the. So tomorrow I'm going to the pub with my wife for our anniversary may be expressed as tomorrow pub wife anniversary. This requires the listener, generally the caregiver or whoever, to accurately piece the messages together. The person may also struggle to name objects or people, even if they're aware of what or who they are. This can be extremely frustrating, and cues and reminders may not work if the brain is simply unable to produce the correct output. See, this is, I highlighted this one so people could see this. The same thing that I had just written is about that. So this is a very, very important thing for people to understand, especially the caregivers looking in from the survivor's perspective of being able to come up with the words and trying to explain themselves. Reading problems. Now, reading problems is something that we've discussed with quite a few of our members, and I had this problem myself after the brain injury. Problems with reading, when evident, may reflect the receptive spoken languages issues. The person may be unable to recognize individual letters, be unable to recognize written words, read but not understand familiar words, and be able to fully understand simple written sentences. I had done that. What's the it's called, I used to do when I started college again, it's like words you didn't use, or phrases and certain terminologies. I went and I had to get a thesaurus to look it up of like what, or ask questions, what do you mean, like to get more detail. It's important to be aware that reading problems may also arise due to other difficulties, such as altered vision. Advice needs to be specific to an individual and provided by a relevant specialist, like an orthopedic or orthoptist. I'm sorry, I couldn't say that right. Common strategies include enlarging print size, selecting a clear font, using a line to guide the support, looking at a full line of print, and increasing contrast between paper and print. Example, black type on yellow paper. Another example that I had used was using a ruler, and some of you may even recognize this. You might have seen it even as a student when you were in elementary school. Some people reading a sentence and they had a ruler on the bottom of each line. As they were going down, they'd move it down. So you're not blocked by other vision, and you're focusing on one line at a time. Problems with writing, when evident, may reflect the expressive spoken language issues. For example, the person may be unable to write down a specific letter of the alphabet, write words with letters in the correct order, write down incorrect words which are still connected to the intended ones. Like they might write wife when they needed to write daughter because of the processing. And of course, may be unable to write complete sentences. And this is highlighting the things that I had just written about here. Writing problems may also arise due to other difficulties, such as altered vision or reduced physical control of the pen or the pencil. Advice needs to be specific to the individual and provided by a relevant specialist, like orthoptist or an occupational therapist. Common strategies include using a line guide to support writing across a full width of the page, and increasing contrast between paper and print on the black type of paper. We got a message here. Oh, I'm sorry. Uh, oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you, James, for your advice. I appreciate that. I just have a lot to read, and I love the conversation, and we all work together on this. I'm just worried that we're not going to be able to go over everything over the next hour that we have left. All right. Next. Here we go to what I was talking about, intelligence. This is a kind of a funny one, and I was fascinated reading this because I think this is great for people that have brain injuries that are brilliant. And there's a number of you guys that I know are incredibly intelligent. It has nothing to do with IQ. Because being book smart and being street smart and like having common sense to me are two totally different things. I know people that are brilliant by the books and in schools, but you ask them to have a social conversation and it's like, I joke, I said it like we're talking to a retarded clam. Because it's just like an empty shell and a moving tongue, because they don't know how to socialize, they don't know how to speak with others and emotion and things like that. But if you ask them an intelligent conversation, it's a whole nother story. Bear with me a second because I look like I just did something I shouldn't have done. All right, let me see. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. No, I did this one here. Okay, good. We did that one there. Definition. Emotional intelligence is a measure of an individual's abilities to recognize and manage their emotions and the emotions of other people, both individually and in groups. Many of us are aware of IQ, intelligence quotient. Designed to measure intellectual intelligence, it offers a score from a series of tests. Higher IQs indicate better cognitive abilities or the ability to learn and understand. People with higher IQs are more likely to do well academically without exerting the same amount of mental effort as those with lower IQs. A logical assumption, therefore, is that people with higher IQs will be more successful at work and through life. This assumption has been proven incorrect. There is more to success than simply being clever. I love that phrase. I just love it. The benefits of higher emotional intelligence. People with higher emotional intelligence find it easier to form and maintain interpersonal relationships and to fit in to group situations. People with higher emotional intelligence are also better at understanding their own psychological state, which includes managing stress effectively and being less likely to suffer from depression. It's self-awareness and self-reflection that really makes a big difference there. I didn't go on detail because I can go on a whole tangent about that. It's a whole nother conversation in itself. There is no correlation between IQ and EI scores. In other words, academic aptitude, like the IQ, has no connection with how people understand and deal with their emotions and the emotions of others. This makes perfect sense. We've all met very clever people who nonetheless had no idea about how to deal with people and the reverse. Some people have high IQs and low emotional intelligence and vice versa, while some people score highly on both and some do not, which is right along. That's the nice way of putting what I was saying before. Excuse me, I'm going to get something to drink real quick. Now, this goes back to what our first conference call was really about in depth, was emotions. And this is a big one because this goes along with the communication, both verbal, physical, and emotional. Emotions are feelings. To start to understand your emotions, you need to ask yourself two questions. How do I feel and how do I know? How do you know how you feel? but others also have the same emotions. At the same time as being aware of your own feelings, you also need to be aware of those of others. You need to ask, how do others feel, and how do I know how they feel? The same thing. How do I know, and how do they feel? There are several ways that we can tell how others are feeling, but particularly by observing what they say, how they behave, including their body language. Researchers suggest that more than 80% of communication is nonverbal, meaning that it comes from the body language and facial expression. Many of us don't like to talk about our emotions, especially not if they really matter to us. So they tend to be expressed even more by our body language. And that leads us to nonverbal communication. Interpersonal communication is much more than the explicit meaning of the words, the information or message conveyed. It also includes implicit messages, whether intentional or not, which are expressed through nonverbal behaviors, which is what I was describing before about folding your arms and turning your back on somebody. Nonverbal communication includes facial expressions, the tone of voice, the pitch of the voice, gestures displayed through body language, which is I can't say that word, and the physical distance between the communicators, the proxemics. These nonverbal signals can give clues and information and meaning over and above spoken or verbal communication. Nonverbal communication helps people to reinforce or modify what is said in words. For example, people may nod their heads vigorously when saying yes to emphasize that they agree with the person, but a shrug of the shoulders and sad expression when saying I'm fine, thanks may simply imply that things are really not fine at all. It also helps people convey information about their emotional state. It helps define or reinforce the relationship between people. It provides feedback to the other person. It regulates the flow of communication, really, like cutting somebody off, that kind of thing. For example, by signaling to others they have finished speaking or wish to say something, like raising your hand, like, okay, who's next, or can I speak now? Common little courtesy thing, in a good way. Learning their language. This goes for both sides of any conversation. I did it again. Many popular books on nonverbal communication present the topic as if it were a language that can be learned. The implication being that if the meaning of every nod, eye movement, or gesture were known, the real feeling and intentions of a person would be understood. This, of course, is absolutely true. Unfortunately, interpreting nonverbal communication is not that simple, because everybody's got their own perspective, or cues that this is the way I see it, their own viewpoints rather. Okay, bear with me 1 minute. Okay. Nonverbal communication is not a language with a fixed meaning. It's influence-driven. Who's that? Okay. I'm sorry, I apologize for that. It's driven by the context in which it occurs. This includes both place and the people concerned, as well as the culture, which is a huge thing. For example, a nod of the head between colleagues in a committee meeting may mean something very different from when the same action is being used to acknowledge someone across a crowded room. And again, when two people are having a social conversation. Interpersonal communication is further complicated in that it usually is not possible to interpret a gesture or expression accurately on its own. Nonverbal communication consists of a complete package of expressions, hand and eye movements, postures, gestures, which should be interpreted along with speech, like explaining yourself. Interpersonal communication is the process by which people exchange information, feelings, and meaning through verbal and nonverbal messages. It is face-to-face communication. Interpersonal communication is not about what is actually said, the language used, but it's how it's said and the nonverbal messages sent through the tone of voice, facial expressions, gestures, and body language. It's a combination of everything. When two or more people are in the same place and aware of each other's presence, then communication is taking place, no matter how subtle or unintentional. Without speech, an observer may be using cues of posture, facial expression, and dress to inform an impression of the other's role, the emotional state, the personality, or its intentions. Although no communication may be intended, people receive messages through such forms as nonverbal communication. This is a big one here. I wrote key points, and I'm going to go over each one individually. Much research has been done to try to break down interpersonal communication into a number of elements in order to make it more easily understood. Commonly, these elements include communicators, like the people, the messages, the noise, which is an interesting one, feedback, context of the conversation, the channel in which it's going, and then the barriers to effective communication that cause the problem. The communicators, for any communication to occur, there must be at least two people involved. If not, you need to see a doctor. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about anything I've said so far? Is there any issues there? I'm going to open up the, give me 1 second. Manage participants. Okay, I'm going to unmute everybody and see if anybody has anything they'd like to say so far. I talked about body language and communicating properly, and there's more things I'm going to go over about how to communicate. That's what's coming up in this next section here.
Well, Michael, you certainly did span on my head there.
I apologize.
You know, I mean, you know, listening to you and then trying to take it all in and process it was, yeah, difficult.
Michael, question, excuse me. This is being recorded, correct? So which means we can go on the ASBIG website and go over this again, correct?
Yes, I put it on YouTube, and then I put it on our website so you can listen to it and review it again.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can review it at our own paces.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is the question, James? Because no, that's mine. James?
I understand what he's getting at.
You know what I'm saying?
What James is saying is if I'm going too fast, and he's
No. It's not that you're going too fast, Mike.
No, it is.
No, I said that James, sometimes like me, you're going at the normal speed, but to comprehend it is tough. So that's why I'm asking, is it recorded so that we can watch it on YouTube or whatever at our own speed?
Mm-hmm. James, you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Would you like to add?
Not at the minute. You know, as I've said to you, like just, you know, slow down rather than reading it out without any. You know, you use the punctuation in what you've written.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying. That's what I was saying, like taking a break, and if you want to add to the conversation or give your side, give you guys a chance to process it and then also feedback on it. I apologize for going so quick.
It's almost like you were in the how can I put it? You were in the Ferrari. You need to get out the Ferrari and climb into the Skoda.
Very good analogy.
Okay. Well, I'm more than halfway through, which is great because I was saying I have 52 slides. I'm at 32 right now.
Well,
Oh,
yeah,
so it is on YouTube. I can go back and watch it.
Yes. And I'm gonna, this will
What I
all
find-
be on there.
What I find interesting, and I hope this helps you guys, I was the caregiver for my father with my mother for
Mhm.
30 years after a full frontal lobotomy. And the information that I'm hearing you speak about now, we didn't have years ago.
Yeah.
And everything that we did was basically just by faith, and there was no additional help once my dad got out of the hospital after a year, and he came home and he was on certain medication.
Hmm.
And it's very interesting to hear, you know, the words that you're using and the terms, because really we had no help. It was my mother and I,
You're
and
winging it.
I'm sorry?
I said you were winging it.
We did. We did. And because of that, I became very, very interested in the brain, and very interested. And back then, they didn't believe that your brain could regenerate itself. They didn't believe that once you had a problem like this, that there was anything for you or to you. There was no rehabilitation at that time. There was no therapies at that time. And it was very interesting because my father was a very, very, very brilliant man. He worked with NASA and Pan American on missile tracking. When he had this accident, as I wrote in my note, the guys in the black suit with the dark glasses were there when the decision was made for the full frontal lobotomy. The things he went through at readjusting his brain, my mother and I was 18 at the time, my mother and I did not really know much except what I had taken in a couple of college psychology classes. But we had this very strong belief system that somewhere in there, my father still existed. He had moments of great lucidity. He read a lot. He maintained himself. He was very mobile, so we didn't have to do anything. But he definitely was completely incapacitated by the brain damage. In later years, when my mother had a massive heart attack and things were not easily understood because of all the reading that my dad had done, he was able to explain to me what was going on when I had to care for my mother in the hospital and my dad at home because of what my dad had done with his reading, his watching TV, his communicating with me and my daughter, and just the way that we lived with him. We were told that he would snap at any time. He was a very dangerous man in the service, so there were a couple of times that it was very dangerous at our house. And my mother and I, one of us was always awake, and he went through that phase, and we figured out how to help him. And it was years later when the study by Jill Bolt Taylor, the woman, the neuroscientist who had the massive stroke. Do you know who that is?
I do.
Okay. Well, when I had seen the thing about Jill Bolt Taylor, we had already been living that with my dad. And it was quite amazing. And to hear all the different things that you're saying right now, one of my friends years ago had a concussion, a very bad one, and he became with Alzheimer's. He's Alzheimer's now, and he's in a place. One of the things that we found with all the research that I did, because I was just a nutcase reader myself, we found out about using coconut oil in the food. We learned about doing things with my dad. Nothing exceptional, because really we didn't know anything, absolutely nothing. And as I said, there were no therapies. There was nothing offered. We were given a stipend and here, take care of him. And he's going to be dead in 5 years. Well, he lived for 30 years. And listening to you now, the information that I have or that I've accrued about the brain and what's happened to it, and hearing earlier when they were talking about having been right-handed and now left-handed, and knowing that there are things that it becomes such, like when somebody goes blind or they lose their hearing, all these other gifts start showing up.
I could tell you
And
more that I've went through.
yeah,
That was
yeah, and
incredible.
yeah, and that your brain will regenerate in another area. Your synapses will change, your neuron channels will change. One of my friends, because I was so interested in the brain, but I'm an artist, so I really didn't do anything. It was just because of my dad.
Mhm.
One of the things that I discovered by reading and reading and reading was that weightlifting changes the neuron channels in your body, and it changes it in your brain. Like if you've been injured, and they can get you into weightlifting, it will change your physiology enough to do something to your brain and your synapse channels. And it is the most, but listening to you today, all those years after the fact,
Yeah.
I'm kind of sitting here with my mouth dropped open at what my mom and I accomplished when I was simply 17 years old.
Mhm.
You know, and what it came down to was when my dad came home and when there were communication problems, when there were issues, my mother, who obviously was a woman of great faith because she took care of him all those years, I helped, but it was mainly her, was extreme kindness. There was never, I do not remember any of us, my mother, my daughter, or myself, getting angry with my dad or being unkind to my dad. I mean, we understood, and when the doctors first explained it to us, they said, you know, you better get all your sharp knives out of the house or anything that can do harm, because this man was a serious person in the service, and you don't know how dangerous it's going to be. And that was what we got, and he got some medication once in a while. And if he had an epileptic seizure or something because medication was incorrect for a while,
Yeah.
he was dangerous.
Mhm.
He was dangerous. And it was amazing what we went through. And the times that he did have an epileptic fit, because we couldn't get him to exercise. For some reason, after all this happened to him, when he came home from the hospital after a year, he promised the family that he would never hurt my mother and I as long as he lived, no matter what he went through.
Yeah.
And everybody was kind of weirded out, because at that time we did not know how serious a soldier my dad had been. It was very, very fascinating to have dealt with all this. And looking back now, because he's been dead 20 years, had we known just a little bit more about the therapies we personally could have done, there could have been, it could have been even a little richer. But our lives were very rich. Even with this huge thing that we carried, our lives were very rich. But I think that was because of the kindness and no expectation.
What kind of seizures did he have? Did he have grand mal or petit mal seizures?
Grand mal.
That's what I thought, because if he's convulsive, that's grand mal. Yeah. And
Yeah. And it didn't happen often, and it appeared from what the doctors told us that it was from medication that was really pressing it. So they take him off everything, and we'd start from scratch again and build up. And I think he had about 3 or 4 of them in 30 years.
Mhm.
And I was the only one, because I was his little girl, of course. I was the only one that when he was coming out of those, and one time he had somebody by the throat, and 4 men couldn't stop him. He was on the floor having a seizure, and they couldn't stop him. And I threw myself on top of him and just grabbed his face, and I kept going, "Daddy, Daddy, look at me, look at me, look at me." And we pulled him out of it. And the one guy said, "Your father could have killed me with one hand."
Yeah.
And we were kind of like, there might be something here we need to check on. So we got a little bit more information. But it was kindness. I mean, it was constant kindness and very consistent scheduling.
Yeah. Routine is everything. So you said
And
that.
we didn't.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. We didn't know that. All we knew was that we just wanted to make sure that this man would feel valued.
Right.
That was the
Well,
whole thing, is that he had value.
it was a positive mindset. You want to make sure that he had a comfortable living in positive environment to help keep that growth and keep it stabilizing his life.
Yeah,
You said he had 3 sisters over 30 years.
yeah, that was it.
That's it. So when he had those three, I mean, how old were you when they happened?
The first one, I was about 18 or 19.
Oh, so you're older and you were clearly conscious of what was going on then. All right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So did they
yeah.
vary in like the length? Did they get worse? Like, was it like 30 seconds? Was it 7 minutes? You know, I mean, there's all kinds of extremes or just moderate seizures as well.
Oh no, when they happened, they were intense. They were very intense.
Okay.
One time I was walking in the house with my daughter, and this is going to sound strange. The air in the house changed. The electricity, something in the house changed. And I looked at my daughter, and she looked at me, and she goes, "What's wrong?" And I ran straight from the floor of the room into the kitchen, grabbed a wooden spoon, because I had already gone through a couple of these by now, grabbed a wooden spoon and went in, and my mother was in shock. My dad was spinning around, and then I yelled, "Daddy," and he fell to the floor, and then it started, and I took care of him, and I told my mother, "Run and call the guys, the emergency guys."
Yeah.
By what was so neat is, because our community was small at the time, we had different people that were very aware, because my dad was a very popular man. He was a Navy recruiter.
Yeah.
When we would call, within moments, the EMTs were at our house. No more than 5 minutes ever. It was amazing. We had just the most incredible, and listening to you and thinking about it, because I haven't in a number of years, it really was grace, a gift of grace to know how to do this.
Yeah.
Because we had no instruction, none whatsoever. I mean, at one point they said to my mother, they said, "We need to put him in an institution, and we'll take care of him. We'll put him away, and you'll never have to worry about him again." And this was when I was 18, and my mother came home, and she told me what they said. And I said, "That's your husband. This is my father. If they put him away, they'll kill him.
Yeah.
It's up to you." And so we kept him. And he stayed healthy. The plate in his head moved a little bit, which was a little funny looking, but nothing unbearable.
Yeah.
He had moments of great lucidity. He had moments where he thought I was either his mother, his wife, or one of his swabbies on the submarine. And when that happened, we would just go along with it. We just went along with it. We didn't say you're wrong or anything. Okay, what can I do for you? What do you need? So, yeah, it was quite a story. And that, we lived it, and it was so difficult for so long. And 20 years out, listening to you guys talking, I'm kind of in awe. Because it's about kindness. It's about exercise. We fed him very pure food. We didn't give him a lot of processed food ever.
I'm a believer.
You know what it is? I'm sitting here and I'm talking about it for the first time in years with people that actually have a clue how serious that brain damage can be. We just simply respected his life and didn't think any less of him.
Yeah.
We really didn't.
That's why I'm trying to do what we're doing here is with this communication barriers is limiting that, because people don't know, or they don't want to know, or they don't have the time. There's all kinds of excuses. So I make this information readily available so it can help the survivors, but it also helps the caregivers as well, because of the stresses of being a caregiver is so hard as well for us that are caregivers too, because of time and the communication barriers and not being able to understand each other. And it takes patience on both sides. That's why I'm talking here about communications and how you could read each other and get into it with one another to get a much better understanding of what's going on.
And I think the other thing that happened is because my dad, the last 5 years prior to that, he had made life so difficult because the PSTD from everything he did in the war started raising its head before he even had the accident. He made life so difficult. And I think what had happened is after he came out of this, and he wasn't always lucid. Sometimes he was like so zoned, it was like you knew he wasn't there. But it was like when he wasn't there, you would just go over, you'd rub his hand, put your arm around his shoulder, give him a kiss. It's okay, Dad, wherever you are, I'm right here. It's okay. And I think that the fact that he made the decision that he was going to be kind and that he was going to allow us to take care of him. And I think that's a hard thing for people that have gone through this stuff, is allow us to take care of you. Allow us to love you. If you're fortunate enough to have people that will love you.
Yeah.
Because once you can no longer fit into somebody else's parameters of what they need and how you fulfill them, many people get sloughed aside. And then you have to hope that you find the therapist or the people that let you know, listen, you're still really valuable because you're still here. So God has a purpose for you. You are valuable. So you talk slower. So what? So you can't write your name as pretty as you did last year. So what? You know, you're valuable. There's a reason you're here. You know, and I think that's a huge part of it.
Absolutely.
I really do. And don't be mad at yourself for what you can't do anymore. We went through a period with my dad where he was so upset at what he couldn't do. And, you know, at one point in time, one of the things that we had to show him was like, well, you know how to do this.
Yeah.
And you help us do that. And you know, and like with my daughter, when she was little, he was the most wonderful grandfather ever. Well, he was like an 8-year-old child often, but that worked out really well. And when he was lucid, we'd talk about it, and I'd say, but Dad, when you're not yourself, you're Emmy's favorite companion. So how is this a bad thing? And when he was lucid, he could get that. And then he started relaxing because nobody was mad at him. And that's the other thing, is if you have people around you and they're mad at you, you have to know it's not you.
Yeah.
It's so important for you to know it's not you. It's really being a caregiver. I think being a caregiver, and I didn't even think about it at the time because I would have never used that word. I was a daughter. That's who I was. I was a daughter. And I just loved him. But he didn't give me a hard time either. He didn't argue with me over his clothes. He didn't argue with me over his food. He didn't argue. He knew he was in trouble. He knew that he was no longer who he was. But we were all excited to find out, okay, you're not that guy anymore, but who are you now?
Yeah.
And maybe it was the humor of my artistry, I don't know. Or maybe it was the humor of, you know, all the artistic dancing, painting, photography, singing, all of that theatrics. I don't know if that was part of it.
It was the love. Really, to be honest with you, it's an aura around individuals that makes it personify. To be honest.
Yeah. You know, I was very angry at him for the 5 years that he put us through a living hell. But when he had that accident, and my mother, you know, she said, what do we do if we bring him home? This is going to land on you, because my parents were older. And I kind of looked at her and I went, that's my dad. If they take him, they're going to kill him. I know they will.
Yeah.
And so she said, okay, if you're up for it, we're going to do it. And I was 18.
Beautiful. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. That's grace. That's grace. And you guys that have had this happen to you, every dream. If you had a dream of painting when you were younger, paint. Go try it. Who cares?
Yeah.
If you have a dream of playing a guitar or playing music or doing something, go do it. It doesn't matter. That will change your brain. It'll change your synapse. It will enhance everything that you are.
That's
What you lost is what you lost is nothing compared to what you can be.
Yeah. It's a whole new beginning. It's a new life for you, and that could be a blessing. You know, that's why.
And it's scary. And it's scary.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And it's okay. You know what? It's okay to be afraid.
Yeah.
I remember nights that my dad, all of a sudden I'd hear something and I'd go in his room and he would be so frightened and I'd just sit in the chair or my mom would sit on the bed and we're like, what are you afraid of? We're right here. And he'd tell us what he was afraid of. And I'd tell my dad, hey, I got a cast iron frying pan. You think somebody's coming in the house? I got the frying pan. What do you want to do? And he'd start laughing, because it was like, we're here. And I think that's the whole thing, to let somebody know you're there.
Yes, 100% agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just really, I have to thank you guys because I might not have, if you hadn't put that in the note, Mike, I might not have come on. But it's really been just such a blessing to hear each of you. And I can hear in your voices that what you've been through.
Yeah.
And it's like you have such value. Otherwise, you wouldn't still be here. You have value.
That's why, we do this. That's the intent of why we do what we do. Because, like, when I had my accident, it was like God kept you here for something more, Mike. I heard that like crazy. And it motivates us, even Henry as well, because we lived by each other a couple times since the brain injuries affected us. And
well, don't forget, you've got to do coconut oil in your coffee and make some shakes out of it because that feeds your brain. And you've got to exercise. And the only one they know for sure, this is a proven scientific fact, the only thing they know for sure that works to make new neuron channels in your brain is weightlifting. No question about it.
Because of the circulation and the oxygen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And just take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
No junk. No junk. You're not junk. Don't eat junk. And take care of yourself. You have no idea how you can bless the world.
Man.
No idea. Amazing. Boy, what a gift you guys have been. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to go back and finish reading what we were talking about before.
Yep.
I do appreciate the story, and I'm glad that we're helping the way we are with you. That's awesome. I love hearing these stories. And I want you to, we have Caregivers conference calls on Thursday nights. And your experience is wonderful. It's all on our website. There's a calendar on our website that shows it. Every week on Thursday nights we do Caregivers calls, and every Tuesday we do open mic calls for anybody to talk and ask questions and get to know each other and do what we do right here. Same thing, except they're open mic. This is more on topic.
Right.
So, but yeah, we do them every week because we're brain injury survivors. You can't ask a person to get together once a month to talk about what happened a couple weeks ago. But even caregivers are so busy, you can't even think of a thought that you had 2 days ago because you've got so much on your plate and so many things on your mind.
Yeah.
So it's also beneficial for caregivers as well. So
sweet.
I just wanted to say thank you.
No, thank you.
So we were talking before about, and we're still talking about, is communication and how important it is between two people to have, like, to communicate with each other fluently and getting our meanings and words out correctly and things like that. For any communication to occur, there must be at least two people involved. It's easy to think about communication involving a sender and receiver of a message, like a delivery. However, the problem with this way of seeing a relationship is that it presents communication as one-way process, or one person sends a message and the other one receives it, while one person is talking and the other one is listening, for example. In fact, oh, bear with me, communications are almost always complex, two-way processes with people sending and receiving messages to and from each other simultaneously. It's always hands and mouths and voices and eyes and emotions and gestures and all that kind of stuff. In other words, communication is an interactive process. While one person is talking, the other is listening. But while listening, they're also sending feedback in the form of smiles, head nods, etc., just like I was just explaining. Bear with me, okay. Messages not only means, oh, then we're gonna go on to the message, like what's the point of the information, like what's the topic type thing. Message not only means the speech used or the information conveyed, but it's also the nonverbal messages exchanged, such as facial expressions, the tone of voice, gestures, and body language. Nonverbal behavior can convey additional information about the spoken message. You could speak something in a low tone, but your body movements say a million words. I'm sure we've all heard that kind of phrase. All right. I got a message. Ah. Oh, I just got a message from James. I apologize, James. Here we go. Oh, there he is. Hi, James. You want to say good night?
Yep, nighty night, everybody. It's 2:30 in the morning, and yeah, I'm starting to become almost as dead as a dodo for the night.
Rest is the most important thing. So.
Well, dream sweet.
Sorry, I missed that.
I said dream sweet, James.
I probably will do. I'll probably get up to my normal antics that I do in bed. Probably end up having a kickboxing match.
Okay, James. I hope we talk on Tuesday when we have the international call, so it'll be a little bit earlier for you.
Right. So you say so it's 9 p.m. for me then.
Yes.
Right. I'll see what I can do then.
All right. Keep in touch on Facebook.
Adios, everybody. Good night.
Good night, James.
Good night.
So we're talking about messages, and nonverbal behavior can convey additional information about the spoken message. In particular, it can reveal more about emotional attitudes, which may underlie the context of the speech. Noise, and this is a funny one because you think noise, you just think of like an annoying sound, but it's much more than that. Noise has a special meaning in the communication theory. It refers to anything that distorts an image or the message. So that's what is received is different from what is intended by the speaker. Whilst physical noise, for example, background sound or a low-flying jet, can interfere with communication, other factors are considered to be noise. Use of complicated jargon, inappropriate body language, inattention, disinterest, and cultural differences can be considered noise in the context of interpersonal communication. I call it static. In other words, any distortions or inconsistencies that occur during an attempt to communicate can be seen as noise. Hope that makes sense. I like that phrase because it's a politically correct terminology. A huge aspect that's very, very important in all kind of conversations, no matter how big or how small, is feedback. Feedback consists of messages the receiver returns, which allows the sender to know how accurately the message has been received, as well as the receiver's reaction. The receiver may also respond to the unintentional message as well as in the intentional message, like we were saying before about body language. Types of feedback range from direct verbal statements, for example, say that again, I don't understand, to subtle facial expressions or changes in posture that may indicate to the sender that the receiver feels uncomfortable with the message, you know, like a grunt, or like the eye looks. We always joke around about eye looks. Don't look at me, don't give me that side eye type thing. Or squinting. Feedback allows the sender to regulate, adapt, or repeat the message in order to improve the communication. Excuse me, I'm eating a cracker. Junk food. No. The next topic is context of the conversation. All communication is influenced by the context in which it takes place. However, apart from looking at a situational context of where the interaction takes place, for example, in a room, an office, or perhaps outdoors, the social context also needs to be considered. For example, the roles, the responsibilities, and the relative status of the participants. An example would be parents to kids. You know, this is my house kind of routine, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah. The emotional climate and participants' expectations of the interaction will also affect the communication. And that always comes into play, especially with family, more than anything. But also happens in the work, especially when there's a hierarchy of any kind. That always happens. The next is channel. This is the communication channel. The channel refers to the physical means by which a message is transferred from one person to another. In a face-to-face context of the channels, which are used are speech and vision. However, during a telephone conversation, the channel is very limited to speech alone. That's definitely an important factor with communicating properly, because you only hear so much. You don't know the look that you could visibly see. You can't see expression, you know, so a lot of things come across the wrong way. Me and my twin brother, I have an identical twin brother, and we sound exactly the same on the phone. And we used to call my mother up and play with her head all the time, saying, "Hi, this is Brian. Hey, what's up?" And she goes, "Oh, hi, Mike." And I'm like, "This isn't Mike." She goes, "Wait a second." And I was like, "You called me, Mom." And she'd get all confused because she thinks it's Brian on the phone. But because you didn't know the tone of voice. It was fun. And we were mean kids. And that brings us to the last group here, is barriers to effective communication. There are many reasons why interpersonal communication may fail. In many communications, the message or what is said may not be received exactly the same way the sender intended it. It is therefore important that the communicator seeks feedback to check their message is clearly understood. And that's so important in any kind of conversation. And this will bring us to the last one as well, is everybody should ask questions. Do you understand what I'm saying? Do you understand what I'm saying? Do you understand what I mean? Do I understand? You know, that kind of thing. That's huge. It doesn't happen nearly enough because everybody's trying to make their point that they're not being considerate of the other person getting the message correctly. These skills of active listening, which is another big thing that we're going to go into next. The skills of active listening, clarification, and reflection may help, but the skilled communicators also needs to be aware of the barriers to effective communication, how to avoid or overcome them. And that's what I was saying about self-reflection. It was always looking, saying, how could I, the tension or problem that may have occurred with communication barriers. Active listening is a skill that can be acquired and developed with practice. However, active listening can be difficult to master and therefore will take time and patience. And that's a key phrase from what we were talking about before with your parenting and being a caregiver and even being a survivor, and shut up and listen. You both stop and step back and listen to each other. And it takes patience. Patience is the one key phrase that's really, really hard, especially in tense situations and stressful situations, which happen. It's life. You know, we all have families, we all have loved ones. And that's why it's so tense, because we do care, you know, on both sides of the perspective.
Right.
Active listening means, as the name suggests, actively listening. That is fully concentrated on what is being said rather than what is passively hearing the message of the speaker. Active listening involves listening with all the senses, as well as giving full attention to the speaker. It is important that the active listener is also seen to be listening. Otherwise, the speaker may conclude what they are talking about is just uninteresting to the listener. Interest can be conveyed, excuse me for a second here. Interest can be conveyed to the speaker by using both verbal and nonverbal messages, such as maintaining eye contact, nodding your head, and smiling, agreeing by saying yes or simply to encourage them to continue. By providing this feedback, this person speaking will usually feel more at ease and therefore communicate more easily, openly, and honestly. And that goes with any kind of relationship. I mean, that's really just everywhere. That's really because everybody's wrapped up in themselves and what's going on and things like that. But a good conversation and positive, like we were saying before about the positive mindset that goes behind a good conversation, is acknowledgement and respecting what each other is saying. And a lot of times that doesn't happen because people are wrapped up in their own mindset, you know, and wrapped up in their own bubble, I guess you could say. Listening is the most fundamental component of interpersonal communication skills. Listening is not something that just happens. That is hearing. Listening is an active process in which a conscious decision is made to listen to and understand the messages of the speaker, which brings us back to what I was saying before, asking questions. The two-way communication. Listeners should remain neutral and non-judgmental. This means trying not to take sides or form opinions, especially early in a conversation. Honestly, I feel that should be everywhere in the conversation. Active listening is also about patience. Pauses and short periods of silence should be accepted to absorb and then respond. I'm a firm believer in that. Listeners should not be tempted to jump in with questions or comments every time there is a few seconds of silence. Active listening involves giving the other person time to explore their thoughts and feelings. They should, therefore, be given adequate time for that. Active listening not only means focusing fully on the speaker, but also actively showing verbal and nonverbal signs of listening we had talked about before. Excuse me. I had to sit back and crack my back. I've been sitting here reading all day. Generally, speakers of all kinds want listeners to demonstrate active listening by responding appropriately to what they're saying. Appropriate responses to listening can be both nonverbal and verbal. Examples I wrote here, of which are listed below, is nonverbal signs of attentive listening or active listening. Oops, excuse me. What did I do here? Oh, here it is. Here we go. This is a generic list of nonverbal signs of listening. In other words, people who are listening are more likely to display at least some of these signs. However, these signs may not be appropriate in all situations across all cultures. Eye contact is a big one. That's one that's generally not, actually no, a few of these are in different cultures, even within the same communities, just different genders also have some issues with this kind of stuff as well. Smiling. Smiles can be used to show that the listener is paying attention to what is being said or as a way of agreeing or being happy about the messages being received. Combined with nods of the head, smiles can be a powerful and affirming that the messages are being listened to and understood. Eye contact. let me see what this is. This is somebody G4. I'm not sure who this is. Okay. Eye contact, it is normal and usually encouraging for listeners to look at a speaker. Eye contact can, however, be intimidating, especially for more shy speakers. Gauge how much eye contact is appropriate for any given situation. Combine eye contact with the smiles and the other nonverbal messages to encourage the speaker. Posture. This is a funny one. I remember when I was in my college classes for social work, we used to talk about this. Posture can tell a lot about an individual and receiver in interpersonal interactions. The attentive listener tends to lean slightly forward or sideways while sitting. Other signs of active listening may include a slight slant of the head or resting the head on one hand. And there's so many different ways that can go with that, which is really funny. Who's that? Hi, Troy. Thank you for joining in. We're nearing the end of the call, but you can listen in here while we talk. Another one is mirroring. This is another way of active listening. Automatic reflection and mirroring of any facial expressions used by the speaker can be a sign of attentive listening. These reflective expressions can help to show sympathy or empathy in more emotional situations. Attempting to consciously mimic like facial expressions, not automatic reflection of expression, can be a sign of attention. Like an easy example is when you see somebody sympathizing for somebody and their eyes, you know, their eyebrows raised because they're like, oh, you know, it's that look. What's another one? Distractions. The active listener will not be distracted and therefore will refrain from fidgeting, looking at a clock or a watch, doodling, playing with their hair, or picking at their fingernails. That's another big way that we've all seen of somebody not, you know, being distracted by some other miscommunication. And I made this note, and I wanted to make this clear because this is being recorded, and I want people to know this. It says, be aware that it is perfectly possible to learn and mimic nonverbal signs of active listening and not actually be listening at all. It's more difficult to mimic verbal signs, though, of listening and comprehension. Like if you're actually listening and comprehending, like to mimic somebody, means you are paying attention because you're acting out like the way they're doing it. So you are really paying close attention to, you know, their actions. I like that. Here we go. Verbal signs of attentive or active listening and positive reinforcement. Although a strong signal of attentiveness, caution should be used when using positive verbal reinforcement. Although some positive words of encouragement may be beneficial to a speaker, the listener should use them sparingly so as to not distract from what is being said or place unnecessary emphasis on parts of the message. Casual and frequent use of the words and phrases such as very good, yes, or indeed can become irritating to the speaker if it's too much. It's usually better to elaborate and explain why you're agreeing with the person. So instead of going, you know, it's just monotonous. You go, no. Why are you really agreeing with me? Or are you just like nodding me so I'll shut up?
Yes, I agree.
Here, this is a good
But I will. This is a pertinent topic. I'm working right now, and I'm gonna keep listening in on this because this is extremely interesting. So please excuse my lack of eye contact, and let yeah.
Who is that, Troy?
I'm sorry?
Oh, okay. No, I had to look and see who was speaking. So it's Troy. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I am. Well, please continue.
Oh, okay. So we're talking about different forms of active listening to show that a person's actively listening to a speaker and how beneficial it is on proper communication. So another one is remembering. The human mind is notoriously bad at remembering detail, especially for any length of time. And that goes for with and without brain injuries. However, Remembering a few key points or even the name of a speaker can help to reinforce that the messages sent have been received and understood. That's part of the working brain. If people need help with like active listening, like memory retention, that's a good thing. It's like when you're talking to somebody, you're using their name. Troy just chimed in. Hi, Troy. How you doing, Troy? And things like that. So I'm acknowledging him, but I'm also retaining the information and remembering who I'm talking to on a regular basis. Remembering details, ideas, and concept from previous conversation proves the attention was kept and is likely to encourage the speaker to continue talking to them. During longer exchanges, it may be appropriate to make brief notes to actually act as a memory jog when questioning or clarifying later. When I sat down before we even started this call tonight, I made sure I had a pen handy. So if I got distracted, I was taking notes on stuff so I can go over details. And I think that's important for anybody in any conversation to do, because it shows that you're paying attention to the person that's speaking, but there's still key points that you feel that are important that need to be discussed. Another thing, I brought this up before, the best part of a conversation is questions. The listener and the receiver both should always ask each other questions to clarify. The listener can demonstrate that they have been paying attention by asking relevant questions and or making statements that build or help to clarify what the speaker had said. By asking relevant questions, the listener also helps to reinforce that they have an interest in what the speaker has been saying. Another one is a key point, and I try to do this on a regular basis, especially when it comes to work environment or just even personal. Is really reflecting when there's like an important conversation, to reflect and go back and make sure that you go over details. Reflecting is closely repeated and paraphrasing what the speaker has said in order to show comprehension. Reflection is a powerful skill that can reinforce the message of the speaker and demonstrate understanding. However good you think your listening skills are, the only person who can tell you if you haven't understood it correctly or not is the speaker. Therefore, as an extension of good listening skills, you need to help develop the ability to reflect words and feelings and to clarify that you have understood them correctly. And that goes along with the note-taking I was talking about before. That's a key phrase to do, is just say, like we were saying earlier about any, brain injury survived. If there's something, a topic that somebody hit a keynote on that you want to talk about, write that word down. And then when you come back to the conversation, you guys can all talk about it. Then that shows that's good listening skills, that it's what you're saying is being interpreted or the communication's open. So if there's a question or a story or a topic that you want to discuss, you can. That's good listening skills. It's often important that you and the speaker agree on what was understood is a true representation of what was meant to be said. That's the key values of any proper conversation. As well as understanding and reflecting the verbal messages of a speaker, it's important to try to understand the emotions. These pages explains how to use reflections effectively to help you build a greater understanding of not only what is being said, but the content, the feeling, and the meaning of the messages. Reflecting. This is a good one. And this is, I touched base on this a couple times earlier, is self-reflection. Reflecting is the process of paraphrasing and restating both feelings and words of the speaker. The purpose of reflecting are to allow the speaker to hear their own thoughts and to try to focus on what they say and feel. To show the speaker that you're trying to perceive the world as they see it from their perspective. You're doing your best to understand their messages. It's also proper because it encourages them to continue talking, like it's valuable, to get their point across in a nice way, not a sarcastic manner or anything like that. Reflecting does not involve you asking questions, introducing a new topic, or leading the conversation in another direction. Speakers are helped through the reflecting, as it's not only allows them to feel understood, but also gives them the opportunity to focus on their idea, the topic. This in turn helps them to direct their thoughts and further encourages them to continue speaking. It's a big one. Clarification. Am I getting everybody okay? I don't want to just, step on anybody if they want to speak up or anything like that.
No, I'm just listening.
2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, cool. We still have 6 of us on here. This is wonderful. Thank you. Oh, I'm just going to break off before I get into about this class. We're almost done, but Troy, this whole call is being recorded, so it'll be available on our website. So if you want to listen in later, it's going to be a little over 2 hours of conversation that you could revisit and listen to it at your own pace and things like that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this is part 2 of a whole series that we did about communication between survivors and caregivers, and the part 1 is already on our website, and this will be part 2. So I just wanted to clarify that before I go on anymore. See, more clarification as I was just talking about.
All right, well, thank you.
You're welcome. Clarifying involves asking questions of the speaker to ensure that the correct message has been received. Clarification usually involves the use of open questions, which enables the speaker to expand on certain points as necessary. It's going both ways. This is great. In communication, clarification involves offering back to the speaker the essential meaning, as understood by the listener, of what they've just said, thereby checking that the listener's understanding is correct and resolving any areas of confusion or misunderstanding. Clarification is important in many situations, especially when it's being communicated in a different way. Communication can be difficult for many reasons. Perhaps sensitive emotions are being discussed, or you're listening to some complex information or following instructions. Finally is the last slide here, and this one is summarization. Repeating a summary of what is being said back to the speaker is a technique used by the listener to repeat what is being said in their own words. Summarizing involves taking the main points of the received messages and reiterating them in a logical and clear way, giving the speaker a chance to correct if necessary. As a further extension of clarification, a summary involves reviewing what has taken place during the whole conversation. It's pretty much a review. And it is important to keep the essential components of a conversation, and it must be given from the speaker's frame of reference, not an interpretation from the listener's viewpoint. That's a huge trait, because when you're listening to a topic that somebody brought up, it's important to make sure you're getting their interpretation of what's being said, not your interpretation of what's being said. That's a big communication barrier that is a huge problem for a lot of people. So again, I'm going to rephrase that. Again, I'm going to repeat it rather. The aim of a summary is to review understanding, not to give explanations, to judge, and to interpret or provide solutions. Summarization should be done at the end of a conversation, although sometimes it may be appropriate midway through as a way of drawing together different threads. At the start of a conversation, it's useful to summarize any previous discussions or meetings, as it can be helped to provide focus. While the summary is likely to be the longest time of a listener will be speaking during a conversation, it's important to be concise and straightforward as possible. Now, this is a slide on here, but it's not the end, because the key point here is not just about survivors. It's not about caregivers. It's about teamwork. It's understanding perspectives from both sides, but working out amends between both sides of the equation to come to a peaceful meaning or agreement together of what needs to be said. And it could be as simple as something as and I've seen this, caregivers not listening to what a survivor wants and being misinterpreted or just never talked about because they're trying to avoid confrontation. That's one of the worst things that causes tension in any kind of relationship is avoiding confrontation, because you need to address an issue in order to get it resolved, because things don't fix itself by not talking. Nothing does, because everybody has their own viewpoints. Everybody's got their own perspectives. And if you don't find that even ground, you're not going to close the gap to make a peaceful experience for the both of you. You know, that was one of the things we talked about on our the part one of this series, was the understanding and what each what each perspective may be like, and how to come across the right way, and how to use the right tones, or in an inadvertent way, and stepping back and thinking about what is said before you say it, and without getting flustered and let emotion take over. That was a huge thing that we talked about in the first one. And this one's about the actual act of talking and sitting down and discussing things, and listen. That's active. That the huge thing was active listening, was giving each person a chance to present, discuss, reflect, and go over it together, and then finding some kind of mutual agreement of a good positive way of moving forward together. Because there were a lot of communication barriers with brain injury survivors. You know, I mean, there's personality traits that come into it too, because I mean, nobody's perfect. Caregivers are all wrapped up in how busy they are and what they've got going on, and taking care of bills and doing their jobs and all that other stuff. And then for the brain injury survivor, things are just confusing and overwhelming, and multitasking is very difficult, and coming up with the right words is hard. But the only way to bridge that gap, which is what this is all about, is talking and discussing things together. That's huge. That's the most valuable part of anybody moving forward and bettering their lives, both for the caregiver and the survivor. And that's pretty much all I had to say about that. I sound like Forrest Gump.
Can I ask a question, please?
Sure.
I feel like I gotta explain myself to anybody that I'm having more than a 15-minute conversation with.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're like, I catch myself sometimes. I ask the same thing 3 or 4 times within a 15-minute conversation with somebody, and I feel like I gotta explain myself. And is that normal? I mean, is that same?
For a brain injury survivor to do that, it's very normal.
Yes.
But there's two things, and this is exactly what we were talking about tonight before you got on. Is you need to be patient with yourself and understanding, because I know you don't mean to do it, but it just happens because it's the processing. The person you're talking to, either they know your history and they have to accept it and be understanding, or they don't need to be in the conversation with you. Is really the bottom line. You stand up for yourself. You know, you could be polite and apologize and say, "I'm sorry." And if they go, "You just said that," then you say, "I'm sorry. This is part of what I'm going through. You know, just be patient with me." And if they can't be patient, okay then. You know, the conversation piece, yeah, and the conversation. So really, but you really start to begin to understand, and we talked about this on the first call. You understand where people stand. You start to see the reality of things, and this is who I am now, and either you accept it or move on. You know, and that goes on both sides of the conversation. You know, you don't need that. You don't need that in your life, because you need people that want to respect what you have to say, regardless of how many times you say it. It's still part of what you're trying to say. As an individual, is obviously important to you, or you want to be taking the time to say it. You know, if you repeat it 3 times, that shows how important it is. That's it.
Right. Right.
That's really what it comes down to in a nutshell. So I hope that helps you out.
It does. I work with the public. I'm a truck driver,
Okay.
and I have to go, like, I go to ports and I load up, and like just recently I have to go and do cruise ships. I go and load cruise ships, and I have to deal with a lot of people. And I really didn't think I was going to be able to do this job. I thought I was going to get overwhelmed. I thought I was going to just gonna forget a lot of things, but I pushed myself to do it, and I'm great at it. People love
That's
me.
awesome. Good.
And they don't know that I have a TBI because I applied for disability back when in 2005 when it happened, and I never got it. I applied. I went to a lawyer and I never got it, so I had to start working. And people, they just think I'm strange. They're like, not strange in a bad way, just
Different.
different. Yes, very different.
Yeah.
They're like, you always smile and you must really like your job. And I'm like, you have no idea. I'm smiling because of what I went through, and I'm still here. I'm still able to walk. I'm still able to have a job.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
Life is good. I just don't. I don't know how to not get around that question of why I'm weird, or like why I said 3 or 4 things.
Don't sweat it. Between us, don't rack your brain about it. It's be confident. It doesn't really matter. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's the bottom line.
I mean, they either love me or they love me not. I'm gonna be me.
That's it. They accept. That's it. That's all that matters is you. Your perspective of you're doing what nobody ever thought you'd be able to do, and you're doing it, and that's it. And as far as your job's concerned, you're getting paid. You're doing your job. Then done. End the story. How many times you repeat yourself doesn't matter. You're getting the job done. Period. So that's it. That's key.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Well, we've been on here for almost 2.5 hours, so I'm going to end the call now. I appreciate you guys joining in, and this will be posted shortly. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
My wife.
Good night.
I had to acknowledge her.
Okay. Take it light.
Good night, guys.